Trains are the backbone to a lot of Factorio bases, but today I've got an idiotic plan that has no flaws whatsoever. No belts, inserters have to touch the train, no fluid wagons, and only one cargo wagon. The cargo wagon will be expanded 10% to make my life slightly easier. Yes, this challenge could be done with a normal capacity, but I would prefer to keep my sanity. The early game will look very similar to a normal playthrough, but I've opted not to use chests to stay more in line with the theme of the challenge. You've got the usual burner-miner chain for coal and directly mining into furnaces for ores. At first I was manually picking up all the stone, but then I realized I could just chuck the stone into a furnace without any fuel to store it. As per usual, the main goal for the early game is to get power production up and running as soon as possible. But unlike in a normal run, I don't have to waste time setting up useless stuff like belt production. Now with some basic power production going, we can start working on research. 17 minutes in, and I finally handcraft the first red science. After a few minutes, I can finally start using assemblers instead of handcrafting everything, but moving items around is time consuming. Next up is green science. To ease my handcrafting load, I'll place some assemblers down. This is cool and all, but there's still a ton of walking back and forth. I'll also start automating belts and inserters for green science. One downside of not having chests is I occasionally have to run back to the boilers to refill them with coal, which gets very annoying. With our research done, I can make the first green science pack a mere 38 minutes into the run. Now we'll rush trains as quickly as possible. So first up is engines. And we ran out of coal. Again. Double the labs means double the research speed, double the science consumption, and double the useless explanations. I'm adding more boilers with the same amount of steam engines to reduce how often I have to refill them. Engines are done. Next up is logistics. That's done, so now we'll do logistics 2. After some labeling, walking back and forth, and dilly-dallying, Logistics 2 is done. Now we'll research trains. An hour and 19 minutes in, we have our train. I also go the whole run without ever picking up the train, so once it's placed, it's on them rails forever. What's super awesome about cargo wagons is you can set item filters on the slots inside. This is actually what gave me the idea for this entire video. Using the train as a junction between assemblers will let us automate science production a little bit more, but I still have to hand deliver plates from the smelters. Unfortunately, there isn't much room to improve until we research train stations, so we'll work on that next. Since throughput is going to be a massive problem, I'm going to take a quick detour to research fast inserters before I finish researching train stations. When that research ends, we enter a new era of automation. Speaking of automation, there's automation 2. The basic design of the base will be based around these small train stations in a large loop, crafting items as it goes around the loop. The train has been set up to wait at all stations until no items have been transferred to or from the train for 10 seconds. That should give enough time for most crafting recipes to complete and for items to smelt. But if the station is missing ingredients, the train will sit idle until the 10 seconds have passed, which wastes a lot of time. These wait times will quickly stack up, so I'll look for a better and faster solution later. For now though, I'll just build the loop and start re-automating everything up to green science. Since there's no complicated logic, at least yet, building the stations is super easy. I'd argue this loop design might actually be useful in normal playthroughs to build an easy mall. After adding all of our old base's automation onto the tape, we can add mining and smelting to the loop, which will fully automate the production of science. Since I don't want to use chests, the miners on the ore patches will be pointed directly into the train, and this is quite slow. Oh well, maybe I can improve it later somehow. But there isn't any smelting set up yet, so I'll park the train and set that up. Oil processing is done. I am not looking forward to that. Regardless, smelting is done. And we've made 1,000 red science. Only took a quick 2.5 hours. A bit down the road, our smelting capacity is definitely going to be a bottleneck, so might as well label it as such. While waiting around for science to complete, I had an idea to improve the stations. The idea itself is simple on the surface. If I track which items are currently in the train, I can disable stations if the ingredients needed for that station are missing. Simple in principle, but you can't read the inventory of a train while it's moving, so we need to read the train every time it hits a station and store its contents. Now, I'm no electrical engineer, so I was left scratching my head on how to use the simple logic of combinators to do what I needed. But after a lot of tinkering, I managed to get the data storage working. It's stupidly convoluted, so I won't explain how it works in detail. After importing the blueprint, all we can do now is wait for the research to complete. Luckily, it only takes about 10 minutes. Now, I just needed to build it, connect all the stations with wire, and set all the station conditions. This also included the mines. This design had some flaws, but it worked well enough, and I couldn't think of a better solution, so I continued to use it for a while. Setting up the station conditions was pretty easy. You just need to pick one item that'll disable the station. So, for gears, that's iron plates. The train was doing some weird micro-stuttering because of the weird combinator setup and was skipping stations entirely, but after a little bit it seemed to calm down and started working normally. I say normally, but by normally I mean intermittently. After a couple small tweaks, it started working more consistently. We're going to need electric furnaces for purple science, so I'll start working towards those. Also, I'll finish running all the wires to the mining outposts. Since the lab station needs to be disabled if we are out of either kind of science pack, we need more than the one condition that the train station offers, so I'll wire up some combinators. Mining speed turned out to be even slower than I thought. We definitely need to find a way to improve it somehow. There we go, steel furnaces are done. We'll need plastic for the electric furnaces, so we'll work on that next. Oil is a tad far away, so it's a good thing we're using a train. I'll also upgrade all of the stone furnaces to steel furnaces. My brain was on autopilot while building the oil outpost. That's why there's a pump. Thankfully, wires are free when you blueprint them, otherwise this would have been very expensive. Well, it's time to barrel everything. Fun fact, fluid wagons were only added to the game a little over 5 years ago, which coincidentally aligns with the last time that I touched grass. Anyway, using barrels severely reduces how much fluid we can carry per load. A normal fluid wagon can hold 25,000 units of a fluid, but since we're only using a single stack of barrels per fluid, we can only transport 500 units per trip, which is a ridiculously small number when you consider that making a single plastic bar requires almost half a barrel of petroleum. You know, I swear this game hates me sometimes. I seem to only run out of power when I'm super far away from the boilers. After walking uphill both ways to refuel the boilers, we get our first load of America's finest black gold. We finally produce our first petroleum a staggering 4.5 hours into the run. Since throughput is still a major problem, I'll start upgrading some of the assemblers and inserters on the more commonly used items. The cracks are starting to show in the train station layout, since a train station can only have a single circuit condition. Recipes that require more than one ingredient won't always be disabled, resulting in the train stopping at the station for no reason. This means that stations requiring multiple items need to have additional combinators to set up to do more complicated checks for the station, and they need to be wired into the network in a slightly different way to prevent them from dumping garbage data back into the wires. This takes a lot of time to do for every individual station, but I'll just have to grin and bear it and design a new station blueprint with this problem in mind. But even with all of the tinkering and minor changes I could think of, the train still kept stuttering and skipping stations, so I'll tear everything down and go back to the drawing board. Tracking the contents of the train between stations was needlessly complicated, so I pondered for a bit and decided that the train would just have to stop at every station and then do inventory checks and move on as quickly as possible if it was missing items. I'll quickly explain how the new system works, it's not super complicated. Instead of the train station enabling or disabling itself, the train stops at the station and the contents of the train are compared to a list of needed materials. If we are missing a material, a green checkmark is sent to the train, signaling that it can move along to the next station. However, there is a tiny delay between the train's arrival and the checks being done on the combinators, so the train will immediately depart. So we have to add a wait condition to the train to ensure it stops for at least a second. That sounds like a lot of work, but it's actually a ton simpler than the old system and ends up working a lot better, although there is still room for improvement. Now, with every station redesigned with a new circuit, we can continue to research plastics so we can make blue science. With plastics done, I'm going to take a minor detour to work on solar panels. I say minor because it was taking too long, so I just moved on to red circuits. Also, I forgot to reset up oil processing, so I'll do that now. I also cleaned up some unused rails and rebuilt the intersection because I was paranoid that the train might skip the oil station. Also, the train keeps running out of empty barrels, so I have to keep walking all the way down to it. It's starting to get very annoying. Our production rates of science are still so abysmally slow that I decide to abandon solar panels for a bit and move on to red circuits. I could really feel the run getting slower at this point. I wasn't happy with the super slow science production, and since the first two levels of science are pretty easy to hand manage, I just manually crafted enough science packs to push for red circuits. Yes, it was boring and repetitive, but at least it gave me something to do. Honestly, in the early game, if I stuck with handcrafting red and green science until I unlocked blue science, it probably would have saved a lot of time. But hindsight is a curse, so let's ignore that and celebrate unlocking red circuits. Next up is modules. So we're going to go ahead and place the chemical plant. It's a sight to see, unloading barrels of petroleum, that's the key. Pipes carry it to the plant with lots of care. Coal brought by inserter makes the perfect pair. Now it's time to make some red circuits, you see. Unfortunately for you, I don't have time to make it rhyme, so I'll just smack down some assemblers, inserters, and poles, all working towards the final goal of producing red circuits on a consistent basis, but modules are done researching before I could finish talking, so I'll start researching speed modules. This is so dumb. I still wish I had solar panels, man. I'll get back to it eventually. After some more hand feeding, speed modules are done, and next up is productivity modules. I had an idea on how to load the train faster at the mining outpost, so I'll start researching stack inserters, and then cars. So here's your Factorio trick of the day. You can use cars as a wide container, meaning you can use mining drills directly into the car and use inserters to pull the items out. This is a trick used in some larger mega bases for unloading trains, but here we're going to use it as a buffer to load the train. Technically it's not a chest, so I think it should be allowed. Plus, the amount of time this style of loading will save per round trip will add up quickly. I also almost picked up the cargo wagon. Whoops. Looking back at these recordings, I wonder how I even finished these runs. Mining productivity. On a throughput bottlenecked base. You're a genius, Jaden. I finish upgrading all of the ore loading stations, and then I go throw some productivity modules in the labs. One of the things you rarely see in a Factorio playthrough that is semi-normal is water barrel production. This feels awful. I started building sulfur production in advance. Super easy, it's just water and petroleum. Also, more boilers to allow further laziness. And sulfur research is done. Now we can start researching blue science. While I finished hooking up the fluids for sulfur, our research is done. Next up is electric furnaces for purple science. I'll also reserve slots in the train for sulfur and blue science. I'll go ahead and start setting up pipes for engines and engines for blue science. I want to make sure the train doesn't get stuck at the lab station, so I'm going to add a small timing circuit to send the train to the next station if it stops at the labs for too long. The combinators will count up once per tick until they hit the weight threshold of 2,000 ticks. Once we hit 2,000, we send a checkmark to the station to allow the train to move on early. We need to make the track a bit longer to accommodate some more stations, and once I'm done doing that, I finish setting up blue science. And we finally made our first blue science. It only took a little over 12 hours. Now we've hit the real turning point of this run. Since all the fluids go on the train, I can't craft plastic by hand, so it's impossible for me to help with blue science production. At this point, Factorio is basically a screensaver on my main monitor, relegating me to only use my left monitor on my computer and ponder my existence. Except for when coal runs out in the boilers, forcing me to run over every couple hours. I make minor optimizations over time, like putting productivity modules in green circuit assemblers. I had an idea for a minor speed improvement for smelting times, but looking back I'm not sure if it was a good idea or just boredom-induced mania. I managed to chop down all of these trees before I could even research steel axes. Back in my day, you had to craft steel axes. That was over 4 years ago? Jeez, I'm getting old. The plan was for the train to go in a loop, dropping off small loads of smeltable items until the train was filled with its smelted counterparts. But spreading out the items to smelt was basically useless. The furnaces would finish smelting their internal buffer of items too fast. Also, I nearly had an aneurysm trying to store the data of the train to enable and disable the train signals, but at the time it was such a pain that it eventually killed the loop idea entirely. I still knew that I needed to improve this smelting setup somehow. Our current base had a science per minute of maybe. Originally, I wanted to not change the spacing of the steel smelters to allow an easy upgrade to electric furnaces. But when you do the math, it turns out that steel furnaces are more energy dense and smelt more items in a smaller space. Sure, you could match or even exceed the steel furnaces with beaconed electric furnaces, but energy costs would be substantial and hand-feeding more boilers would drive me insane. So, more steel smelters it is. Also, I started throwing speed modules in assemblers with longer crafting times. 1.4 science per minute isn't fast, but it could be worse, and this could be foreshadowing. After nearly 16 and a half hours, we finally have electric furnaces. I'll build production for those and then start researching purple science, or as I like to call it, purple science. Annoyingly, the blue science assemblers are snagging all the red circuits that we need for furnaces. 3-ish hours later, and almost 19 hours into the run, we finally have access to purple science. Next up is batteries. I'll go ahead and start setting up the prerequisites we'll need for purple science. First up is rails. Next up is productivity modules, and then finally the science itself. While we wait for purple science to start producing, I'll start working on the stuff we'll need for yellow science. First up is batteries, and then advanced oil processing. Setting up batteries is pretty easy. They just need copper plates, iron plates, and sulfuric acid. And sulfuric acid is just made of iron plates, water, and sulfur. Water delivery might become a problem, but whatever. We'll sink that ship when we cross it. Also, blue science requires sulfur as well, so it might take a while for sulfuric acid to get going. 21 hours in, and we have our first purple science pack. Currently, we're averaging about half a science per minute, not including the ludicrously slow purple science. Advanced oil processing. Where do I begin? Due to not having tanks to do circuit conditions with, managing the levels of individual types of oil is a nightmare all the way until the end of the run. Managing the empty barrel to filled barrels ratio and fracking the excess oils is nearly impossible with my current setup. I tried my best to be slightly more efficient with my circuit conditions, but it was futile, so I just had to grin and bear it. Is it futile or futile? I don't know. But hey, whatever. It's done now. I'll tear down the old oil setup. I'm not sure why I didn't do that first because now I have an extra oil refinery. And would you look at that? The train is stuck. Again. Advanced oil processing really is a nightmare. Due to imbalances in the amount of barrels, I constantly have to add and remove different kinds of barrels, usually just the normal empty barrels. But still, if I don't do that, it won't run smoothly and it'll just keep getting stuck at the oil station, as you see here. And it keeps happening again and again and again and again. If I kept saying again every time it happens, we'd be here for a long time, so let's just move on. At the moment, there really isn't much for us to improve, so it's time to sit back and relax as this train goes thousands of miles without an oil change. We are skipping a ton of stations at the beginning of the loop. I really should have put smelting at the beginning, but whatever, it's too late to change it now. I really need some new adjectives to express how slow the science is, but I don't think Merriam-Webster's suggestion of filibustering is the right word either. Oh well. We are now 24 hours into the run. Still no blue circuits, and production science feels hours away. Also, the train ran out of coal. That's cool. But I think this should fix that. Also, with medium power poles, I can now fit 3 stack inserters in the ore pickups. Neat! Lubricant is done, so now it's time to start working on electric engines. Setting up lubricant is super easy. You don't even need water, just straight up heavy oil. In my sheer boredom, I tried experimenting with fully automated steam power production, but you don't have to be a genius to realize that was a horrible idea. The oil setup's circuit conditions continued to be unbearable, so certain stations started to receive a timer to ensure that the train didn't get stuck while I was at Taco Bell. Funnily enough, water is the bottleneck right now, so no automated steam power for us. 25 hours and 40 minutes in, we have electric engines. Let's set those up and start researching flying robot frames. Wait, doesn't flying robot frames sort of imply a non-flying robot frame? Why make the distinction? Whatever, maybe they abandoned it in development or something. Well, there was Compilatron, but it was added almost 4 years after the flying robot frames, so I'm not sure. If anyone knows anything or has an idea, let me know in the comments. Anyways, after all that talking, electric engine production is finished. "27 hours in, and we have access to robots, but logistics chests are still chests, so no, I'm not going to use logistics robots to cheese the rest of the run. Next up on that fang-dangled research tree is blue circuits. Since I've already automated all the ingredients, flying robot frames are super easy to automate. I'm getting tired of hand feeding the boilers with coal, so I'll finish researching solar panels so I can AFK more effectively. I'll place down some solar for now, and since the solar panels completely take over power production during the day, that'll reduce coal consumption significantly, so it'll work for now. I'll place down some accumulators later. Get it? Accumulators? Come on. Back to working on blue circuits. The solar panels are working well. They completely power the base during the day now. I do eventually manage to snag some batteries for a few accumulators though, but since they only run if no power is being produced and the steam power runs during the night, they're basically useless until we can make enough of them to store power for the entire night. Which, with only 8 of them, is not currently possible. Real quick, I want to visualize how much of each item that the science consumes. It'll help you understand why the factory is so slow. Red science is pretty cheap, same with green, but once we go past blue science, sciences start to take enough resources to require more than one full round trip with the train to get enough ore for the plates. Keep in mind, we need to make them all at the same time, so it adds up very quickly, as you will see later. Also, I realize there's a milestone for dying, so I'll do that really quick. "43 hours in, and we've made 1,000 blue science, but still don't have blue circuits. What's funny is we're currently low on green science, not purple, blue, or red. Green science. Another 3 hours crawl by, and we finally have blue circuits. Now we just need to research low density structure. These later sciences are starting to take a very long time. 300 science packs took about 15 hours, and this isn't even with purple or yellow science yet. As mentioned previously, there is room for improvement on the individual train stations, and all these hours of AFKing have given me plenty of time to think. The slowest part of the loop was skipping stations we'd already passed the checks for. The 1 second minimum delay quickly adds up after hundreds of loops. With some tinkering, I realized that I can remove the 1 second delay entirely by forcing the train to check if the train is at the station. How would that help, you might ask? Well, the reason we were skipping stations when we didn't have the 1 second delay was the train didn't have enough time to send its contents to the combinators, do the logic, and send it back. Each combinator has 1 game tick of delay, so we need to stop the train for at least 1 tick for the checks to complete. Basically what's happening now is the train sends out its train number to the station, but the train can't leave until the train receives a signal from the station acknowledging its arrival, which takes about a game tick or so. TLDR, I've reduced the minimum wait time from 1 second to about 16 milliseconds. After changing the train station to support the new early release method and adding new logic to each station, our average round trip now takes significantly less time. More waiting, and low density structure is done. It only took about 9 hours. I'll set that up now. Also, we can start researching yellow science. Low density structure is super easy to automate too. It's just ridiculously copper heavy. "52 hours in, we finally have yellow science unlocked. I'll set up production for it, and then we just have a few more minor researches to do before we can unlock the rocket silo. First up is flammables, which is pretty cheap, so it's super fast. For rocket fuel, we're going to need solid fuel. Here I go with the light oil recipe, but later down the line... Butter. Why did I write butter in this script? Am I okay? Anyways, later down the line, I switched to petroleum to make oil processing less complicated.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform.
I'm starting to run out of cargo slots, so the extra slots I had reserved for ore have to go away. Bummer. Also, see if you can spot the mistake. Did you find it? Because I did. I accidentally had 2 slots for low density structure. I forgot to set a slot for solid fuel. Another 6 hours later, rocket fuel is done being researched. I'll go ahead and set that up now. Next up is speed modules 2 and productivity modules 2. Two-ish hours later, speed modules are done, and 2 more hours after that, productivity is done too. Now, unfortunately for me, rocket control units take 300 yellow science, which is very expensive. This will be our longest research yet. Also, our first yellow science is finally made 63 hours into the game. I twiddle my thumbs, redo some of the oil processing, deliver coal, upgrade inserters, and lots of other base maintenance stuff while I wait 30 hours for that to finish. All that's left to research is speed and productivity module 3s, and concrete. This is not quick at all. In the time it takes to research just these 3 things, I could have walked from my house in St. George, Utah, all the way to Las Vegas without using the freeway. I also had to move the miners on the iron ore patch because they had completely sucked up all of the ore on the left side. 44 whole hours pass, almost 2 full days, and finally the trio of time wasters is done. Now for the slowest research of all, the rocket silo. 1,000 of each science. This is going to take nearly forever. The rocket silo gives no mercy. There is nothing we can do but wait. And wait I did. Days passed, and days turned into over a week. Our initial iron supply ran out. I had to use a new patch to the north, and while I waited, an estimated 1/100th of my entire life came and went. Here's some more fun statistics. 1.4 million babies were born, and over 500,000 people died. The United States national debt rose by around $14 million, and I tried cheesecake for the first time. 202 hours in, and we are 69% the way done. 84 hours. It took 84 hours to research the silo. And you can bet your mother's left pinky that I am going nowhere near space science. No satellite this run. We're just getting off the planet. Unfortunately, we still have to build and launch the rocket. I saved as much time as possible by deactivating the production of items we didn't need to build the rocket. Even with as many micro-optimizations as I could muster, the timescale of this rocket launch still far outpaced my expectations. Almost 92 hours. Let's put that time into perspective once again. If I walked to the nearest California beach, sat down in the sand, and ate an entire fistful of sand every second until that rocket launched, people would look at me weird and I would die. Regardless, I still have to sit here and micromanage the base until the rocket launch is done. So I get to wander around a bit, put productivity modules and stuff, build more rocket fuel production, move the copper miners, and click this button for no reason. After putting a car into the rocket, we can ride this puppy into the great beyond. After a total of 315 hours, 47 minutes, and 10 seconds of playtime, I've finally left that cursed planet. Real quick, I'd like to take a moment to thank my supporters on Ko-fi. Their memberships and donations help me justify spending ludicrous amounts of time to make videos like this. And if you would like to support me, you can find a link in the description. And that's all for today. My name's DocJade. Bye-bye.